You guys kept telling me that the 3-minute project figures could be real dummy 13 killers. So of course, I had to find out for myself. The product photos looked amazing, and judging by the price, these figures seemed premium. But once I started building them, everything turned out to be much more complicated than I expected. In this video, I'm going to build these figures, compare them with Dummy 13, and give you my final verdict. So make sure to watch until the end. First, let's open the box and see exactly what we get inside.
Nice.
Right away, I was impressed by the quality of the parts. Everything looked very clean, with almost no excess plastic or rough edges. So let's grab our tools and start removing everything from the frames. And here is when I started worrying that the finished figure would be really small because all the body parts looked absolutely tiny. Seriously, some of these pieces were microscopic. But there were also a lot of them, and then I realized this set doesn't include just one figure. It actually includes two. That's definitely a huge bonus. After a little preparation, I cleaned up all the parts, although there was barely anything to clean. If you remember some of the more problematic dummy sets we've built before, they required a ridiculous amount of cleanup. As soon as I started building, I noticed something important. Every part was labeled with a letter and number, matching the markings on the frames, which means removing and cleaning every single part at once was a pretty big mistake. Don't do what I did. I had already mixed everything together, so finding the correct parts became much more difficult than it needed to be. Alright, let's finally start assembling our figure. Overall, the build was pretty straightforward. Most parts looked different enough that even after mixing them together, I could still find the right pieces without too much trouble. But one thing stood out right away. The parts fit together incredibly tightly. Maybe a little too tightly. Some pieces required a surprising amount of force, and that quickly led to my first major problem. I couldn't properly attach the shoulder joint. No matter how hard I pushed, it just wouldn't stay in place. The arm kept falling out again and again. At first, I thought the part might be defective, so I replaced it with another one. But that didn't help at all. The arm still fell off with almost no effort. For a moment, I honestly had no idea how to fix it, but eventually I found a solution, and it worked much better than I expected. Then I ran into another problem. The leg simply refused to go in. I used a ridiculous amount of force, but nothing worked. So I wrapped the part in a cloth to protect the plastic and brought out the hammer. Yes, I literally hammered the leg into place. Surprisingly, one solid hit worked perfectly, and the leg held extremely securely. The finished leg also has some extra movement in the hip, which should make more dynamic and unusual poses possible. So the leg problem was solved, but the shoulder was still a disaster. At that point, I thought the shoulder joint was defective. Then I started building the second figure and ran into the same shoulder problem again. The legs were just as tight, but this time I knew what to do. I skipped the struggle and went straight for the hammer, and just like before, it worked perfectly. But the shoulder was still a huge problem. The arm kept falling out, and I honestly had no idea how to fix it. I could glue it, but that would completely remove the shoulder movement. Then I had an idea. What if the joint also needed to be pushed much deeper, just like the leg? It was an extreme solution, but it worked. You can clearly see how much deeper the piece sits after being hammered into place. And that was it. The arm finally stayed attached. I repeated the process on the second shoulder, and we finally had a fully assembled figure. I quickly went back to the first figure and fixed it the same way. And just like that, we finally had two amazing figures. After all that struggle, the result felt even more satisfying. Before the final review, I still had to assemble the display stands. and yes, they were just as tight. But by this point, I knew exactly what to do. Wrap the parts in a cloth, use the pliers, and bring out the hammer when necessary. It became clear that this wasn't a bug, it was a feature. Once I understood how the set worked, everything came together perfectly. And the finished figures looked fantastic.
Nice.
However, I'm still not sure how comfortable these figures would be to actually play with. The joints are extremely tight, so they feel much more like collectibles designed for posing and display. The set also includes this unusual open hand option with an incredible range of movement. You can bend and twist it into some really wild positions, even something like a breakdancer pose. It's definitely a fun and interesting option, but it doesn't make the figure look particularly strong or powerful. So for this build, I decided to use the fist instead. Attaching the weapons was another challenge. The sword was extremely difficult to push into the hand,
Pew, pew, pew.
while the pistol and rifle went in a little more easily. And here is our soldier holding the rifle. I really like how he looks with this weapon. Dummy 13 figures also come with similar rifles.
Nice.
The set also includes a sheath for the sword. You can attach it to the figure's thigh and place the sword inside. Now let's move on and assemble the second display stand. Once again, I had to use a lot of force. Without these pliers, I honestly don't think I would have been able to finish assembling the set. But then, for some reason, this particular piece suddenly slid perfectly into place without any additional effort at all. Apparently, the figure wanted to surprise me one last time. And here are our two finished figures. Now it's finally time to compare them with Dummy 13. Dummy 13 is much bigger, easier to move, and more enjoyable to pose. Its overall construction is simpler, while these new figures feel more detailed, creatively designed, and premium. However, creating every pose with these figures requires much more effort. It's also important to keep in mind that the Dummy 13 figure I'm using for this comparison is an injection molded version. There are also many 3D printed versions, but their joints usually don't move nearly as smoothly as those on the molded figures. Dummy 13 figures can look almost identical at first, but their actual quality can be completely different. Some versions are smooth, durable, and really fun to pose, while others are stiff, fragile, and much less enjoyable to use. I assembled and compared several different versions in another video, so make sure to check it out after you finish watching this one. Dummy 13 is also much easier to customize. In one of my very first videos about these figures, I transformed one of them into Spider-Man. Customizing these new figures would be much more difficult because all the parts are incredibly small and detailed. However, with some paint, modeling clay, and a lot of patience, it could still be possible to turn one of them into something completely unique. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see me try something like that. I also noticed that Dummy 13 has some additional movement in the feet, while these new figures don't have that kind of articulation. Now let's take one final look at both figures and see what kinds of poses they can hold. Overall, I think these figures are really cool, but I definitely wouldn't call them Dummy 13 killers. In my opinion, they belong to a completely different category. They feel more premium, more detailed, and more collectible. At the same time, they're also smaller, more expensive, and noticeably less playable. I paid about $20 for this set of two figures, while a single Dummy 13 usually costs only around $3 to $4. And now, make sure to leave a comment. Literally any comment. Tell me what you'd like to see next. Should I build more action figures, or should I try customizing one of these figures? You can even just write blah blah blah. It still helps the channel a lot. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.